protein. So there is a difference, right? So this is the process. This is the process which clearly explains us how a gene controls a protein and how the protein controls cellular activities. So gene controls protein activity or the protein production, but this protein will control the remaining activities. So the central dogma or the concept of central dogma is explain us the flow of genetic information, how the genetic information will flow from genes to the protein. So this was coined by, I mean, this entire concept was introduced by Francis Crick in the late, late 1950s, that is in 1958 by Francis Crick. He was the person. And I hope you remember in 1953, they discovered or else elucidated the structure of DNA. Once they elucidated the structure of DNA, then this man, the Francis Crick, proposed one more concept. That's what you call central dogma. What do you mean by the central dogma? Central dogma means the flow of genetic information from DNA to RNA, RNA to protein. That means the movement of, or else it is the entire spectrum of genetic information decoding. I could say in a simple term, it's a genetic information decoding, or as a protein expression. A simple term you can use, a protein expression. Now, there is a master molecule in our nucleus called as DNA, which holds entire information for the cell. Finally, cell, if you put all cells together, it is a tissue. If you put tissues together, there's organs. All the organs, if you place it together, there's an organism, or else what you can call whole human beings, or maybe any animals. So, all the activities what we do is all under the control of the gene which is found inside the nucleus. Now, there is a two concepts are happening. One thing, the DNA has to replicate each time. That's a one important thing. Second time, whatever DNA replicates, it has to produce RNA for it. So replication will be happening simultaneously. Simultaneously, the RNA will be copied. So you might be thinking there is a one observation you might have made in Francis Crick model, that is DNA is anti-parallel in nature. That means the strand is both the strands are running from 5' to 3' direction, but it is in the opposite way. That means one in 5' direction in one way, another is 5' direction in another way. So it is anti-parallel in nature. So there is a big question how this anti-parallel DNA are simultaneously copied in DNA replications. So the mechanism of DNA replication I'll explain you in the next coming classes. But today we are not going to explain how the DNA will replicate all those things. But when we explain what you call central dogma, the DNA replication concept is also so important. So DNA is the important molecule which are made up of deoxyribonucleotides. So this deoxyribonucleotide manufactured molecule called DNA, which can replicate itself. Replication means it can make its own copies. That means the parental DNA can make daughter DNA. Why this replication process is so important in central dogma? It has to maintain its accuracy. That means there is one enzyme which involves in DNA replication that is called DNA polymerase. DNA polymerase. The polymerase means it can introduce a phenomenon called polymerization. Polymerization means it can add the nucleotides and make the molecule in a polymer format. So it is polynucleotide means it is a combination of many nucleotides. Who will do that work? That will be done by the DNA polymerase. So how this DNA polymerase, even after many replication, how it maintains its exact genetic makeup? That's a big question. So this DNA polymerase it makes 1 in 1,000 mistakes. That means when it adds 1,000 nucleotides to a specific DNA, one mistake it can make. So that is a maximum possibility. That is not a minimum possibility I'm telling. The maximum possibility is one mistake in 1,000 nucleotide addition. That means the fidelity of DNA, fidelity, fidelity of DNA replication is very, very high. So we can manage our DNA in a very precise or very accurate information manner. So that's very important in replication. Replication is a process where DNA can make its own copies. Those copies are highly precise, highly accurate, and DNA is able to manage its fidelity with the help of enzyme called as DNA polymerase. So that process is happening inside the nucleus. So what happens once it is formed this what you call daughter nucleus, daughter DNA, or maybe during this replication, it has to transcribe. So that's what you call central dogma. That means the combination of replication, transcription, translation is called as central dogma, where during transcription, So what happens? These DNA molecules are transcribed into RNA molecule. You might be thinking how this process is happening. So DNA is a double strand and RNA is a single strand. That's very important. So transcription is with the help of enzyme called RNA polymerase. RNA polymerase is an enzyme which will copy DNA and make RNA. And only difference in between DNA and RNA, there are two differences between DNA and RNA, if I'm saying specifically. The one difference is the nucleotide base thymine is replaced by uracil. You cannot find any thymine base in RNA. And one more difference is the ribose sugar is found in RNA, deoxyribose sugar is found in DNA. That means the pentose sugar which is found in RNA is ribose, and pentose sugar which is found in DNA is deoxyribose. So the two major difference between RNA and DNA is one is a deoxyribose sugar, and second one is a nucleotide base, that is a thymine and uracil. Uracil is found in RNA. And RNA, in most of the case, it is single-stranded. So in a transcription process, this replicated DNA will be transcribed into RNA. So through a process called as transcription. So transcription is a process where RNA is formed from DNA with the help of enzyme called as RNA polymerase. So DNA polymerase can make DNA, RNA polymerase can make RNA. Why it is called RNA polymerase? Because nucleotides are added and made polynucleotides of RNA. So it is called as RNA polymerase. Once it is made RNA polymerase, next process is a protein. So that process is called translation. So initially it was replication, then transcription, and then the process called as a translation. Why it is called as translation? Because a translation is a very important process where the language will change. If you look at DNA or RNA, the language is a nucleotide, adenine, guanine, cytosine, and thymine. But in case of protein, the languages are glycine, alanine, valine, leucine, isoleucine, methionine, cytosine, histidine, many amino acids, like the list goes like that. So there are 20 amino acids, and there are two more are added recently. That means the major basic amino acids are 20, and these languages are entirely different. In case of DNA or RNA, the nucleotides are held together by a phosphodiester bond, but in case of protein, the amino acids are held together by what you call a peptide bond. So this is the phenomenon is entirely different, because here language is found in the form of nucleotide, here language is found in the form of proteins. So it is called as a translation. You look at this, the translation is happen in the cytosol or a cytoplasm. Why the translation is happening in the cytoplasm? It is mainly because translation will happen on the major supramolecular machinery. Supramolecular machinery, we call that. Why it's a supramolecular machinery? Because it is a major machinery which involved in protein synthesis, that is ribosomes. Ribosomes are found in the rough endoplasmic reticulum. If you see the cellular structure, there are rough endoplasmic reticulum which is found outside the nucleus in the cytoplasm. That rough endoplasmic reticulum will have these ribosomes. So ribosomes are the machinery or the molecular machine which makes a protein. So it's a tailoring process. The tailoring process will done by the what you call ribosomes. So the Francis Crick in 1958 proposed a central dogma which clearly states that the entire spectrum of information flow in a genetic system or in a cellular system. So it moves from DNA to RNA, RNA to protein. So DNA to RNA is called transcription, RNA to protein is called as a translation. A transcription happens with the help of RNA polymerase, a translation happens with the help of ribosome. So you might be thinking whether ribosome is sufficient. No, ribosomes are not sufficient to produce protein. There are what you call translational factors. There are initiation factors, IF, we call IF initiation factor, IF1, IF2, IF3 initiation factors are there. There are elongation factors are there. There are termination factors are there. So why this process has to terminate? That's so important, because what protein you are producing, it should be a functional protein. If it has an extra amino acid, it may be act as a mutated protein which can create lots of cellular disturbances that may lead to cancer in the future, or maybe in the cellular, it can create disturbances in the cellular gene expression. the final product derivation. So that's why the proteins are terminated at particular stage, and each protein has got its own half-life. So these proteins are sent for degradation once it is produced. So the Francis-Crick model clearly states DNA forms RNA, RNA forms protein. So it explains the flow of genetic information in a biological system. So I hope you understood what is a central dogma. It is the flow of genetic information in a biological system. When you explain about a central dogma, you have to write it in one or two words, what is DNA replication. Then you have to write it one or two sentences, what is a transcription. Then you have to write it one or two sentences in translation. Together, if you put it all this mechanism, we can call it as a central dogma. So in the bottom, I have written one more sentence. Does the central dogma always apply? In 1958, Francis Crick proposed this phenomenon of central dogma. Across the scientific community, maybe the common man believed that the entire process are happening like this. But there was a break. There was a major accident happened. The molecular accident happened in 1970. So that I want to explain you. Here I have mentioned one enzyme or one process which is in a reverse manner, that is called reverse transcription. That discovery, reverse transcription mechanism discovery, changed the view of entire central dogma. That's why I put this question. Does the central dogma always apply? No. Central dogma does not apply all the time in all the cases, but in majority of the cases, the flow of genetic information is from DNA to RNA, RNA to protein. But in some very strange cases, or maybe some less evolved organism, or maybe in some viruses, this phenomenon even can go in a reverse direction from RNA to DNA, then DNA to some other mechanism too in our body. So that's why there is an exception to Francis Crick model of central dogma. We'll see a little more about this reverse transcription. That's very important. Sometimes they will ask for it. So this reverse transcription phenomenon involves a major enzyme called as reverse transcriptase. So this reverse transcriptase first discovered in 1970 by the independent and simultaneous discovery. It was an independent as well as simultaneous discovery by two major persons. You may have heard about him, David Baltimore and Howard Themin. The Themin flu and all lots of medicines, you might have heard about it. So David Baltimore is a very, very important person in the field of reverse transcription molecular biology, and another one is a Howard Themin. So they discovered this enzyme called as reverse transcriptase. So this reverse transcriptase was first found in RNA viruses or as retroviruses. So these retroviruses are one of the major retroviruses, I would say, in this present scenario. That's HIV, human immunodeficiency viruses, retroviruses. Then there is a Ross sarcoma virus. The first discovery was in Morris sarcoma virus and Ross sarcoma, RSV, Ross sarcoma virus, the first discovery of reverse transcriptase. But later they even elucidated in many viruses like HIV, human immunodeficiency viruses. And today, if you look at any news channel, anywhere, the people are talking about reverse transcriptase, PCR, RT-PCR technique, reverse transcriptase PCR. So why this reverse transcriptase PCR everywhere now? It's mainly because our present coronavirus, or else what was novel coronavirus, which arrived from the People's Republic of China. So that virus genetic material is RNA. So the problem with this virus is our genetic material is DNA. Once it infects, it cannot manufacture RNA directly. So what it does is, after the infection, RNA will enter inside the body, and then it makes DNA from that. So how it is making DNA means it uses its reverse transcriptase enzyme. Then it can integrate this genome even into our own system. That's a big problem. What I'm telling in case of virus will infect us. At the same time, this virus can put its part of genome into our genome also. We can't completely avoid that kind of concepts which are happening in the course of evolution. You just imagine a particular virus A is infecting me. After the infection, this virus can put its small part of genome into my own genome. So we cannot completely neglect that kind of concept. May happen because this reverse transcriptase is so strong in this kind of retroviruses, so it can produce a number of DNA advances. Why? This virus is infecting us. This virus is not infecting us to kill us. This is infecting us to propagate its family or else make a baby viruses. That's all. Its final aspiration is to make a next generation of viruses, not to kill the host. But during this entire process of its propagation, our host or the host which has got infected with this virus will no more be able to survive because of what? because of immunocompromise, or as see, in case of viral infection, many of them won't die because of viral infection. They die because of over immune response. That is called a cytokine storm. We call that the storm. If you might have seen in storm, thunderstorm, and also it's a burst, a large energy burst in a small place, either in the form of air or maybe in the form of water, or cloud burst we can call. So large quantity of water is pouring into a particular place. The same thing will happen here. A huge cytokine burst or a shock. That shock our body cannot tolerate. The body will lose. The pressure will go down. Remaining vital organ will can't survive. So what happens? The person will die. So that's a big problem in case of virus. So this is the exception to central dogma, that is reverse transcription. And these people got Nobel Prize in 1975. I hope. If you want, you can verify it. 1975. I hope these guys got a Nobel Prize for this simple magnificent work, I can say, because which gave us lots of information, and today lots of techniques are based on this reverse transcription. So I hope you understood what is central dogma. Central dogma is a process of converting DNA into RNA, RNA into protein. So it explains us the entire spectrum of flow of genetic information in the biological system. And there we are explaining what is replication, what is transcription, and what is translation. Or else you can put it central dogma in a simple term called gene expression. But there is an exception to this mechanism, which was discovered in 1970 by David Baltimore and Howard Fleming, and which clearly states that there are viruses called retroviruses, which can make the DNA from RNA by using enzyme called reverse transcriptase. With this explanation, we will move further. Further, what we are studying is a little more old story, not the present, whatever 1970 or 2020 story, but there was a clue given by one person. Is experiment we are studying here. So that is Griffith. Frederick Griffith. He is so important in the present scenario because after 100 years, in 1918, there was a what you call a pandemic happened in 1918 in the Europe, mainly in the Europe. That time we don't know whether it was happened in India or some other Southeast Asian country or what you call neotropical countries like Latin America, but it was really happened, and it was really shake the entire Europe and United States and killed around 100 million people, and you can compare it with the present coronavirus outbreak or what you call pandemic, which killed nearly 20 million people, approximately 2 million people. But it is maximum it can kill up to 2 billion, what the prediction says. But there is 100 million people are died. That was happened in 1918. That's called Spanish flu. That is called influenza infections. But there people did not die because of influenza. People died because of pneumonia, secondary infections. But that was in 1918. Post 1918, there was a scientist called Frederick Griffith who was trying to develop vaccine for this pneumonia. And so to develop new vaccine for pneumonia, he was culturing this Streptococcus pneumoniae bacteria. So influenza is a virus. Because of viral infection, our body will compromise with immune system. So what happens? The secondary infection will happen. People will die because of pneumonia. This Frederick Griffith took it as a challenge and started developing vaccine for this secondary infection called Streptococcus pneumoniae. So he cultured this pneumonial bacteria, culture plate. The bacteria can be cultured in a plate, that you will study the culture techniques and all in the last semester. Next semester you will study. There you can culture any bacteria by using artificial media. So he developed a media, and so he started culturing this bacteria. When he was culturing this, he observed two strains of bacteria. One strain, which I have shown here, smooth strain, that is called S strain. He named it as S strain. And there was another strain which was showing a kind of a rough surface. So bacteria, when it grows in a culture plate, it will appear in the form of colony. By looking at the colony, what you call morphology, you can identify whether what kind of bacteria is this. So it's important to see what is a bacterial, what you call colony characteristic can be exploited to identify the bacteria. So that's a technique. Still, we are using it. So when he was culturing, he found two strains. That is, one is a smooth strain, which is a virulent, and another rough strain, which was non-virulent. Virulent strain means it can cause pneumonial disease, and non-virulent strain means it cannot cause pneumonial disease. So virulent strain can cause disease, non-virulent strains cannot cause disease. So how you can differentiate virulent and non-virulent strain? The virulent strain, why it is virulent? S strain. Why S strain is virulent? That's very important. S strain is virulent because that time he observed there was a lipopolysaccharide coat surrounding this one. So which was allowing this bacteria to evade our immune system. That means to escape from our immune surveillances. We have a 360-degree immune surveillances in our body. This bacteria has developed a mechanism which has got an outside port through which it can escape from them. But a rough strain could not escape because it does not have any port surrounding. So it will be captured by the time you observed this R strain could be captured by our body and could be eaten by our cells. So difference was due to the presence of mucus coat in S strain bacteria, whereas R strain bacteria lacked this coat. That I mentioned there. If you want, you can read it. So we'll go to his experiment. What he has done in this experiment, that was in 1928. That means after 10 years of pandemic in 1980. That's very important because the post-pandemic, lots of research will happen, lots of new things will come, even after our coronavirus pandemic. So lots of new research, new techniques, new diagnostic method, new treatment way, new virus vaccines will develop because lots of financial inputs, lots of scientific thought will put into that. So next we'll go to his experiment. Before going to his experiment, I'll tell you, whenever you conduct experiment, whatever time when I conduct experiment, we need some experimental animal. So this experimental animal can be a cockroach, I'm telling. This experimental animal can be a Drosophila. This experimental animal or experimental organism can be bacteria, fungus, or any other thing. This experimental animal can be a mice. It can be any other guinea pigs. It can be what you call monkey, chimpanzees, or it can be human beings. The problem with human being is you cannot inject directly bacteria into human beings and see that whether he develops a symptom because we are human beings, right? We are evolved one. We don't allow someone else, but we can use this humble, less evolved animals like a guinea pig, or maybe I cannot say less evolved, but they are evolved, but not too much like us. Maybe mice can be used. So Frederick Gift took mice. Mice is easy to manage. So what he has done? So he first experiment I have shown with the alpha arrow. In the first experiment, he took R strain bacteria. That is, I have mentioned here in the green, green dot. Sorry, blue dot. I have mentioned in blue dot. He took that bacteria and he took that in syringe and injected into mice. He took rough bacteria, that is non-virulent bacteria, or pneumonia, streptococcal pneumonia he took and he injected into mice, which is non-virulent. And after he observed whether the mice will develop any symptom, mice did not develop any symptom, so mouse lives. That mice, nothing happened. There was no threat to that mice life. So first case, he took rough strain, injected into the experimental mouse, and mouse lives. But in second set of experiment, what he has done is he took a smooth strain. There I mentioned in case of here you can see smooth strain which has got a coat, yellow coat outside, or else a polysaccharide coat, and he took that bacteria and injected into the experimental mouse. After a few days, it developed the pneumonial symptoms, fever, and other symptoms, and mouse dies. In rough strain, nothing happened, mouse lives. In smooth strain, bacteria, when the bacteria injected, the mouse start developing symptoms and mouse dies due to pneumonial infections. Then what he has done is he took this smooth strain, which is virulent, which can cause pneumonia, and injected this smooth strain and heated it in a tube. He took it in a test tube and heated it. So when you heat bacteria, what happens? Bacteria will die. So that dead or heat killed smooth strain he took. You can see I mentioned heat killed because it lost its shape and all. I mentioned it in the form of stars. There you can see. So this heat killed bacteria he injected into a mice or mouse. So what happens? The mouse lives. Same thing happened like in rough strain, nothing happened. In heat killed smooth strain also nothing happened. So rough strain when he was injected, nothing happened. Mouse lives. When he was injected smooth strain, the mouse dies because of pneumonia. When he heat killed a smooth strain and injected into mice and nothing happened, mouse was very happy. And next what he has done is he has done one combination and which has gave a path-breaking idea of a genetic information in us. So he took rough strain and heat killed smooth strain, put it together. He made a cocktail. He made a cocktail of rough strain and heat killed smooth strain and injected into experimental mice. And experimental mouse developed symptoms of pneumonia and dies. You might be thinking why? Because from this case, he concluded that there is a principle called as transformation. That means this dead bacteria might have, or this live R bacteria or R strain might have taken genetic material from dead S strain and converted this, and because of this phenomenon, R strain might have converted into S strain and caused the disease and killed the mice. I hope you understood what does it mean. That means S from S strain, the genetic material of S strain entered into R strain through a process called transformation. And because of that, R strain converted into S strain and killed the mice. So this is a clear breakthrough of transformation. So he did not clearly state that it is a DNA are responsible for this something, but he just mentioned there is a transformation principle can happen between the bacteria, which might be responsible for transforming this virulency from, which may be responsible, might have responsible for conversion of non-virulent strain into virulent strain. But in the later 1944, I hope, MacLeod, Avery and MacLeod, they are the one who confirmed the DNA is responsible for this transformation. So later part of it because Griffiths, he has given some idea from that someone else, MacLeod, Avery, and they took in 1940s, they confirmed this transformation principle where the genetic information can move from one bacteria to another bacteria. I hope you might have understood what is Griffith's experiment, where he took a pneumonial strain. One was R strain, one was S strain. R strain was not causing any disease. S strain was causing disease. When he injected R strain, mouse dies. Sorry, when he was injected S strain, the mouse dies. When he was injected R strain, mouse lives. When he was injected heat killed S strain, mouse lives. When he was injected the cocktail or the combination of R strain with heat killed S strain, the mouse dies. It's because of in genetic information movement from a dead S strain to R strain and converting this R strain into S strain. So this gave us a clear idea of a transformation. From this, we move further, and so there was one more experiment to confirm what is the genetic information. In the 1950s, 53 or before 50s, Rosalind Franklin were studying genetic material, Maurice Wilkins were studying. So see, it was discovered in 1868 by Frederick Mischer. After that, lots of work were happening about DNA, but there was no confirmation about whether DNA is the genetic material or RNA is the genetic material. That was the problem. So the few were claiming that protein is the genetic material. Some claiming there was RNA. Some claiming there was a DNA. Lots of confusions. But in 1952, that means 1 year before the elucidation of complete structure of DNA by Francis Crick and Francis Crick, and in 1952 Alfred Hershey and Martha Chase, they provided a convincing evidence that DNA is a genetic material. How they provided DNA is a genetic material, that's also important. They have to provide, simply saying is not enough, so they have to give them a clear idea how the genetic DNA can act as a genetic material. That is very important. To prove this, he took a bacteriophage. Bacteriophage means the virus which infect bacteria are called as bacteriophage. So he took a T2 bacteriophage and a bacteria. So what is bacteriophage? We'll see the structure of bacteriophage. So the bacteriophage, TMV, tobacco mosaic virus, and all you might have seen. It's a bacteriophage. So that's tobacco mosaic virus you might have seen. You might have got the clear idea of what is a virus means in the earlier. I don't know whether you studied, maybe in the PUC you might have studied it. A lecture you might have seen somewhere the structure. It is like our what you call a satellite, or maybe the space vehicle, how it exactly lands on moon. The same mechanism happens in case of bacteriophage. So this bacteriophage will have a nucleic acid inside. In this picture, you can see there is a yellow color and there is a capsid, there's a protein outside. So he exploited two things, this Hershey and Chase, Alfred Hershey and Martha Chase, they exploited these two things. That is, one is a capsid and another is a nucleic acid. So what he has done, He has radio-labeled nucleic acid with phosphorus 32, and he radio-labeled protein with S35. Sulfur 35 is a radioactive material which can be used to label sulfur. So that sulfur could be used in the case of bacteria. So why, how it can be used, how to label it? This is a big question. What we have to do is we have to culture this bacteriophage and bacteria in a medium consists of sulfur 35. So what happens? Sulfur 35 is the sole source of sulfur for the bacteriophage. So what happens? This bacteriophage will consume this to make the protein. Protein is cysteine or methionine. Cysteine or methionine is a sulfur containing protein. So it will have this sulfur S35. So it will glow, right? It will glow. The radioactivity you can see there. Same thing will happen in case of phosphorus 32. Why I'm telling in case of phosphorus 32? This phosphorus 32 is found in DNA because it is there in the phosphate. That is the backbone of DNA. So you can clearly see where is the DNA because it eliminates, because it is radio labeled, radioactive material, phosphorus 32. So the same way, we culture the bacteriophage in a plate where phosphorus 32 is there. Culture the bacteriophage in a plate where S35 are there. So you will get both the phage, one with phosphorus 32 labeled phage, another with S35 labeled phage. So I'll explain Hershey-Chase experiment with the help of three pictures. Three different pictures, but it is same concept. Three pictures will tell us the same concept. To give you all a more clarity on this part, Hershey-Chase experiment, I'm planning to give you all with a three picture with same experimental evidences. You can use any picture to explain this Hershey-Chase experiment. This experiment you might have studied maybe in zoology. You are having a zoology, might have studied it, but we will revise it again to understand, to get the clarity on the part of Hershey-Chase experiment, because this is the primary experiment which gave us a clear idea of DNA is the genetic material. I hope, I don't know what is the time now. I'll see the time. It is already 11:40. So I'm stopping here. Next class, we will continue with the next slide. That is